those will have come from outside the European Union, and you will have paid nearly a 10% tariff on those flowers, because that's the rate the European Union sets. Well, more on trade a bit later on this show. But if you think about the big stories of this week, well, of course, we've got the poisoning scandal in Salisbury, and pretty shocking pictures yesterday of people wearing nuclear, biological, chemical suits in a cul-de-sac in Salisbury, in the shopping centre. And at 11 o'clock, we'll talk about that and ask whether maybe it's time that actually our Prime Minister fronted up Vladimir Putin, sat down and had a meeting with him. But that aside, the world news has been dominated this week by one man. Yes, of course, it's the Donald. Firstly, because he's actually put in place his tariffs on steel and aluminum, as they call it, in the United States of America, something no one thought he would do, and that's leading to perhaps a big standoff with the European Union, although he says that friends will be exempted, and Australia have already won that concession. But of course, the even bigger story, the huge story, is the one about his potential meeting with Kim Jong-un. Now, bearing in mind that everybody said he was a maniac, a lunatic, he would take us to the Third World War, this is pretty remarkable progress. He hinted about it earlier on this week, and this comment that he made says a lot, not just about his policy, but about how much I think he's now actually enjoying being US president. At a dinner, before it was officially announced, he said, "I won't rule out direct talks with Kim Jong-un. As far as the risk of dealing with a madman is concerned, that's his problem, not mine." Which, I think, when you get Trump, who's started to tell jokes about himself, it does tell you that he's quite comfortable in his own skin. Well, last night, he was in Pennsylvania at a rally. There's a congressional by-election taking place there on Tuesday. Here was Trump last night in Pennsylvania talking about the possible upcoming meeting.
They're not going to send missiles up. Think of it. They're not sending missiles up. And I believe that. I believe that. I really do. I think they want to do something. I think they want to make peace. I think it's time. And I think we've shown great strength. I think that's also important.
So things are happening. And is it time for us to now recognise that Trump is a friend and an ally? And if you think, no, I still think he's dangerous and actually is a threat to world peace, well, call me on 0345 6060 973. Or perhaps like me, you think he's achieved more than any previous US president, and just the very thought of these two men sitting down together is a good thing, potentially, for world peace, then text to 84850, and perhaps you're still on the fence. But anyway, tweet your thoughts, your comments, your questions, using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Watch us on Facebook. We're live here from a London studio. You can comment there too. Now, I'm going to go straight to South Korea, to LBC's correspondent, Alex Jensen there. Good evening, Alex.
Yes, good evening to you from Seoul.
So, very big, dramatic days. Is this potential meeting between Kim and Trump, is this seen as very effective power broking by the South Koreans?
Yeah, I mean, my immediate reaction when I spoke to you guys in the immediate aftermath of this announcement hasn't changed too much, in the sense that I think this is a dance that requires several partners. You know, the old saying, it takes two to tango. Well, it takes at least three to tango to bring Trump and Kim Jong-un together,
sure.
With South Korea playing a very important part there. But, I mean, there's no doubt that the Donald Trump factor, everyone knew when he came into office that it could be disastrous for North Korea, but it could also bring about an opportunity that had not been there before, that wouldn't be there with a president who was doing everything by the playbook. You know, straight away he was talking about having a hamburger with Kim Jong-un, for example. Yeah. That sort of rhetoric, it can break through, it can confuse Pyongyang in a way that they've not had to deal with. I just want to add one other thing, that you mentioned there are two stories that have been dominating, the tariffs as well, but you know that is absolutely integral to this story as well, because we've got a very confusing dynamic just on the South Korean home front alone, in that if Donald Trump is not careful, he's going to alienate this sole ally, which has served as a broker, but which could potentially become less than a close ally in the future, and that would certainly be harmful.
Yeah, OK, well, that's perhaps why, Alex, he's made it so clear that there are going to be exemptions for people that he regards as friends and not as a threat. So I presume they'll find a way through this. Would it be reasonable to think that the severity of the sanctions that have been placed on North Korea are perhaps the biggest single factor that have driven Kim to accept this meeting?
If that is the case, then it's probably China that deserves the most credit, because from the U.S. perspective, under Obama, the sanctions have been allegedly crippling several times over in the past, and certainly from South Korea's perspective as well. We had a couple of conservative administrations in a row that certainly weren't keen to give North Korea much of a break. We do now have a liberal administration, which in South Korean terms means an administration that wants to cooperate with North Korea. I mean, that's not to say that it's always black and white, but that's the general political lines here. Now, as far as the sanctions are concerned, certainly they've been ramped up and ramped up again. But I think the biggest thing that Donald Trump has brought to the party is his willingness to talk of things like fire and fury, to basically ramp up the rhetoric from the U.S. perspective to match North Korea at its own game. And I think, he's confused Pyongyang, and he's made them consider him a sort of equal dialogue partner, at least, someone that they want to have a conversation with. But it certainly did rip up the playbook to a certain extent last week, because when North Korea was pushing forward with its charm offensive with South Korea during the Winter Olympics and now the Paralympics, you thought, well, they're doing this to drive a wedge between Seoul and Washington. It seemed so obvious. But now, going to the table with Donald Trump, where they must know everything's a bit unpredictable, it does suggest that maybe they were worried about that U.S. military threat of a bloody nose strategy or worse.
Yeah, well, that's certainly, Trump made that very clear in his Pennsylvania speech, that he felt that America's strength is what perhaps had led to this. And overall, as we sort of proceed towards these talks, is this being treated with great joy in Seoul and South Korea?
I think cautious optimism, even by President Moon Jae-in, who said just before the big announcement, at a time when he would have known what that secret message was for Donald Trump, the invitation for talks, he said, that this is good progress, but many obstacles still remain in place. We've seen in the past breakthroughs. North Korea has in the past opened up to International Atomic Agency inspectors, and that all went horribly wrong. I mean, we've seen this go back now more than a decade, this whole process, and we've been disappointed before. We've seen this cycle of aggression and charm offensive. My better instinct is telling me this is just going to be another one of those moments of charm from North Korea's perspective. But the fact that you got Donald Trump at the wheel on one side and Kim Jong-un on the other does make things very interesting, and I do hope I'm wrong and that this does bring about a meaningful change. I can tell you that the steady head in all this certainly will be South Korea. Moon Jae-in has had a permanent smile on his face since the opening ceremony. His face must be hurting by now, but he is so diplomatic about this, and he will bend over backwards, I'm sure, to do everything he can to make sure that South Korea is a steady middle partner. But like I said before, there's a lot of discontent about the talk of tariffs. Steel is a very important export for South Korea.
Yes. And
I know you said there may be exemptions, but it's not clear at all at this point. And we are currently under a process of renegotiating a free trade agreement. And I honestly am sensing on the street here anti-American sentiment starting to rise. And that worries me, because for expats like myself, a South Korea without U.S. protection, I mean, you just look at the history of the Korean War. I would trust Donald Trump any day, to be honest, over Xi Jinping, the man who wants to be in power forever, and that Russian administration right now.
No. Well, I think most people would agree with that. Alex Jensen, thank you very much indeed. Well, that was Alex, LBC's correspondent in South Korea, describing the prospect of these talks there being greeted with cautious optimism, but concerns over tariffs. As I've always said to you, the whole point of the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show is, unlike all the other shows, where it's journalists talking to politicians and then mostly journalists talking to journalists, this is the place where the public gets involved. And Piers, a first-time caller from Reading, is first up. Good morning, Piers.
Good morning, Nigel. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
So is it about time Piers, we stopped talking about protests on the streets of London and calling this bloke a warmonger and wanting him banned and saying he's mentally ill. Is it about time that we recognise this guy is a friend and an ally, and a very important one?
I certainly think it is. I think a lot of the public they're just getting very flustered over all the negative news that comes out to do with him, or all the hit pieces that the mainstream media do on him. But actually, I think it's time to look at what he's been achieving in the time he's been in office. The fact that he is constantly positive about what he does, that he's actually a voice of optimism around the world, and he's actually achieving many great things for the American people, even through the rough time he's put through by the media and politicians in America.
And has your impression of him improved over the time, or were you a sort of fan of his to begin with?
Well, I have to admit, I was a fan of his to begin with, but every day that goes on, I'm more positive in my belief of him, and I'm sure that every day that goes on, I'm more sure that he'll be elected in 2020.
Yes. No, Piers, I'm with you. Thank you. And and Piers making the point there that this guy's actually doing a very good job. I put my neck on the line going over to the States in the middle of 16 and being openly very supportive of him. I'm now beginning to think that's one of the best decisions I ever made. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show. It's now 10:16. Whenever we discuss Donald Trump, some of you say, but Nigel, you never ever criticise him. Well, I do, actually. I think the sacking of James Comey was a disaster, which led to the Mueller inquiry. But I backed this guy in the beginning because I thought he had good instincts. I backed this guy in the beginning because I loved his bullish optimism, and I think the world needs a lot more of that. On Twitter, I thought there were broadcast rules on impartiality. There are. So why don't you pluck up the courage, rather than sending me anonymous tweets, to ring 0345 6060 973 to tell me why I'm a complete deluded idiot, and that actually what Trump is doing, wanting to meet with Kim Jong-un, is actually a total disaster. Perhaps be better if they were just continually throwing abuse at each other. Not everybody, of course, thinks it's good news, and the Observer, in their editorial today, say, talks are crucial, but vain Trump blunders again. And there are suggestions in other newspapers today that actually what this does is to raise the profile and credibility of Kim Jong-un, that in some ways it allows him to be seen as an equal to the president on the world stage. All I can say to those bits of negativity is, do you know what? If these people meet, and just if, world peace was brought a little bit closer, I couldn't care less whether it raises Kim's credibility in North Korea. It's the big picture that matters. And I'm reminded that, just over 30 years ago, there was an American president who the very same newspapers said was a moron. Frankly, intellectually nowhere near good enough to be the American president, just a B-movie actor who made money advertising cigarettes, that he was an embarrassment to the country, a warmonger, a disaster. And you know what? After that Reykjavik summit, effectively, Ronald Reagan won the Cold War, and within a couple of years, the Berlin Wall had come down. And still, his detractors on the left never gave him 1 ounce of credit for it. Perhaps we're in the same position. We will see. Either way, whether you like him or don't like him isn't really the point. The point is, isn't it about time we started to treat him as a friend and an ally, and perhaps took him a bit more seriously than we have been in the past? And I'm flooded with your messages on Twitter. Trump, the only president to deliver on his promises, does not need financial backing, so he can do what he wants, says Kingy on Twitter. Funny. At CPAC, he said on the stage, I've kept more promises than I actually made in the campaign. So keeping promises to him is a big thing. An estimate that came out from the Heritage Foundation, big US conservative think tank, that said in year one he's actually carried out 64% of his election manifesto. As I say, you may agree with what he's doing, you may disagree with what he's doing, but he is actually doing what he told the American public he'd do. Makes a bit of a difference to this country, doesn't it? Paul is a first-time caller from Canvey Island. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I'm very well. So, should we start taking Trump a bit more seriously and treating him with a modicum of more respect, Paul?
Absolutely. I mean, I was making a direct comparison to your research with the character Jim Davison last night, my wife, and who he literally said, I hate him. And I said, why? So she said, the obvious spikes that have been come up in the bad press recently. Well, actually, when you look at his profile as a person, he's a great father, devoted husband, charity worker, etc., etc. And at the end of the program, she's actually said, well, he's actually a great guy. I think you're going to find out with Trump, after his term, he's going to, as you said, with Ronald Reagan, 30 years down the line, he was he was thought to be a comedian and an actor, blah blah blah. But he was, a peacemaker.
Well, do you know what, Paul? Jim Davison's a good friend of mine. I'm going to ring him after this show and say that Paul from Canvey Island compared him to the American president, and that will make him laugh. And I've no doubt, as a result of that, the next time you see him on stage, he'll have a gag about it too. But, Paul,
I remember seeing you on the programme, actually, last night.
Yes. Yeah, no. I mean, we do actually tend to form our opinions of people by what we read in newspapers or what we see on blogs. And sometimes that impression that we get is one that is deliberately created to be a negative one. So, Paul, did you think a year ago that Trump would do the kind of things that he's done?
Yeah, I've always been a believer in Trump. I've always been a promoter of him with my friends, the family, and workmates. And they've also laughed at me, and etc.
Oh, join the club, Paul. Join the club, Paul. I've been laughed at for years.
Same here. But no, I think he's a great guy. As you said, he's pulled up 64% of his manifesto, and I'm sure he's going to continue in that vein.
Yep.
And as far as inviting him across the UK, if we don't, we're missing a trick. We had that prince from Saudi Arabia. Where
Paul, they cut people's hands off, they behead people, women, homosexual, but that's fine. That's fine. Yep. Trump makes a couple of brash comments, and oh my goodness me, up in arms, and a London mayor wants to ban him. Paul, I thank you for your call. Have a great Mother's Day down there in Canvey Island. Trump is deranged, I get by text. He didn't even think to tell his foreign minister. China is the real reason Rocket Man has stopped firing. Trump is the loose cannon. Well, who is it that actually got the Chinese to toughen up their sanctions on North Korea? Trump has led this from the front. He's blown the whistle on what the North Koreans are up to. Now, look, I know that over the last 25, 30 years, there have been several attempts at talks with the North Koreans, proposals about meetings. It was rumoured at one time that Clinton may go and meet the North Korean administration, and there is a trust issue too. Are they actually going to do as they say? Are they going to stop, developing on their road towards a nuclear weapon? There is a big trust issue, but hey, if they're prepared to talk and meet, this has to be progress. Margaret says on Facebook, Trump is a great man, achieving so much in a short time, and proud he's our ally. Well, he wants to be our ally, Margaret, but we're not letting him be our ally, and this current trade dispute perhaps gets to the heart of that debate. Ian says, you're an idiot for thinking this about Trump. Why don't you move to America? Oh, I love that. What a wonderful argument, isn't it? So if you don't like, just emigrate. I'm sure lots of people, Ian, would agree with you. If I ask people now online to club together for a ticket, it wouldn't take very long, I'm sure. Jan says, Trump is damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. Saying that, I think he's slowly gaining popularity as time goes on. I feel confident he'll do another term. Jan, I think that's the point. I think there are those who've always liked him, just think he's fantastic. There are those who absolutely hate him, will never change their mind. But I do think there is a middle ground in this and other countries of people saying, do you know what? He's doing what he said, and he's making some progress. And I do think there is a change of tone. I detected that with his speech at Davos, when, of all people, the boss of Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Blankfein, said there was more in his speech I liked than I didn't like. So I think he's beginning to win people over. Justin is calling from Romford and a first-time caller to the show. Good morning, Justin.
Morning, Nigel.
Good. So, what do you make of Trump, then?
Right, well, firstly, I'd like to say I'm not great on my politics. I don't really read up on it too much, because it winds me up, if I'm honest, but...
You're not alone with that, Justin. Millions of people get wound up with it, but it is somewhat of a necessary evil living in a modern Western democracy.
It is. I mean, my opinion of Trump has always been, I don't think Trump actually went to become president because he was passionate about it. I think he was the most powerful businessman in the world. where else could he go? But I do think that he's going to succeed at this job because of that fact, because he's a businessman. A businessman, especially Trump, does not know how to fail. And that can only be good for America. Now, this thing with Kim Jong-un, how much of a coup would it be to be the first head of state in history to actually have talks with North Korea and actually become allies with North Korea?
I think allies, Justin, is perhaps stretching it a bit far because they're a communist. But at least as Churchill once said, Jaw is better than war. And just even the very act of having this meeting, it's great progress, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, I know I'm not alone in this opinion. I don't think Kim Jong-un is necessarily a dangerous man. I think he's got dangerous ideas. But I don't think he's a dangerous man, really. I don't think he's got the resources to be as dangerous as he'd like to be.
That may be true. That may be. And Justin, tell me, are you one of those people whose impression of Trump is warming as time goes on?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it if you think outside the box, right now, as a politician, he's probably not great, but as a businessman, he's fantastic, and he does things. Tactically, he doesn't do anything without reason.
No, you're absolutely right. Justin, I thank you very much for your thoughts and your call. And Trump, more confident than ever, he's already registered a slogan for his 2020 re-election campaign. If you remember, last time he ran on Make America Great Again, he's already registered for 2020, Keep America Great, ! Love him or hate him, he's got a certain self-confidence, hasn't he? You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in RBC. It's now 10:30, and well, it's not just potential talks with North Korea, it is, of course, tariffs. America to impose a 25% tariff on steel and a 10% tariff on aluminium, or aluminum, as they call it, on that side of the pond. And the response from the European Union is, of course, one of uproar. How dare Trump behave like this? This is awful. This will damage global trade. Hang on a second. The European Union have already introduced their own tariffs on aluminium and steel. So it's okay when they do it, but it's not okay when he does it. Total rank hypocrisy. And I predict this relationship between America and the European Union is not going to improve. Look, the EU, Brussels, is pretty suspicious of America anyway. They absolutely loathe Trump, and I should be in the debate in the Parliament on Tuesday morning in Strasbourg, where they'll no doubt be frothing at the mouth over Trump. But for the first time, somebody in the world is actually standing up to them, because the American administration does not like the European Union either. In fact, you could argue it's that the biggest Eurosceptic shift in the last couple of years has been in Washington. Trump tweeted out a couple of days ago, the European Union, wonderful countries who treat the US very badly on trade, are complaining about tariffs on steel and aluminium. If they drop their horrific barriers and tariffs on US products going in, we will likewise drop ours. Big deficit. If not, we tax their cars, etc. Fair. You can see what Trump's doing here. This is the businessman. This is the guy looking for the deal. This is the bloke saying, hey, hang on a second. You all are making it quite tough for us to sell our products into your markets through tariff. You started this. I've retaliated. If you want to escalate it, you can, and that's fine. But actually, what he's really looking to do here is to get a better deal, and as he sees it, a fairer deal for American goods coming into the European Union. The trouble is, I don't see this being resolved quickly. And guess who's caught? Piggy in the middle. You've guessed it, the United Kingdom. Now, what's our situation in terms of trade on steel and aluminium? Well, we sell roughly £500 million worth of goods, steel and aluminium goods, to the USA every year. That doesn't make it one of our huge markets, but hey, for the engineering companies out there making these high-quality products, America is a very important, and for some of them, a crucial market. And Trump has said they want to do deals with friends. So Malcolm Turnbull, the Aussie Prime Minister, goes to meet Trump. No tariffs with Australia, and he describes Australia as a great country and as a friend. And you know something? We should we should, because the point of these tariffs is not to stop highly engineered products that can't be sourced anywhere else coming into the States for use in the construction industry and things like that. You know, what he's aiming at is China, basically. And China, who massively raised their production of steel at a time when they had no domestic demand, dumped it on world markets, crashed the prices, leading, by the way, folks, to the closure of steel in this country, in South Wales and the North East. So, you know, I've never been a protectionist historically, but I felt over the last few years perhaps what China was doing was wrong and was unfair. And we should, given the fact that Trump, given the fact that Wilbur Ross, the Trade Secretary, Robert Lighthizer, the negotiator, all people that I've met and spoken to in the last few weeks, given that these people want the relationship with the UK to be as good as possible, we should be able to negotiate this exemption within 48 hours. And by the way, I'm happy to volunteer. I'll help if you want me to, Mrs. May. But of course, we can't, because we're stuck inside the European Union and we're banned from making our own trade policy. Now, you may say, well, thank goodness then we're leaving on March the 29th next year. Yeah, but the Prime Minister wants us to go into a transitional period which will go up to virtually the next general election. So we are stuck in this knot for many years to come. And I can't see a clearer example of why we need to break free, not to have a transition period, and start looking after our own interests. That's my view on trade and tariffs. Back to Korea. Gavin says, I was a fan, then I wasn't happy with his Syria strategy. I'm still not on the train, but the North Korea breakthrough is great. And Gavin reflecting a view that Trump said he'd be a non-interventionist, and actually he has intervened in Syria. Some people don't like that. On Twitter, I get Nigel Farage, you are clueless over Trump. No, I'm not. I'm not clueless. I mean, you might say I'm wrong, but I'm definitely not clueless. You know, I know this guy. I know what he's trying to do. Ben is calling from Bristol. Good morning, Ben.
Hi, Nigel.
So, are you one of those that thinks we should take Trump seriously, or do you think he's an absolute idiot?
I certainly don't think he's an absolute idiot. I've phoned in on this show a few times.
I know you have, yeah.
Talking pro-Trump, and it's good to be in such sweet agreement, Nigel, isn't it, on these matters? And I think that you've spoken a lot of sense today on Trump. This guy is just so clearly the right man for this job, and people who can't see that are just blinded by their own prejudices, their own political or personal paradigm, or political correctness, or just oversensitivity, or being the sort of people who get overly sensitive and overly easily offended. I was down the pub last night with my mates. We're talking about Trump.
Good for you.
I stood back with my arms folded, and I said, do you know how great and how free I feel to be able to just freely say, he's a good guy, he's doing a good job. He's not perfect, but he's doing a good job.
And Ben, what do the...
It's a big scoop, isn't it?
What I think it's... Listen, Ben, I think it's huge. And I frankly think those that are still criticising him have lost their reason. In fact, I kind of think, Ben, you know, if he invented a cure for some terrible disease, they'd still find a means of criticising him. But I'm curious, Ben, you know, you're down the pub in Bristol with your mates talking Trump. How does that group look at Trump now compared to, say, a year ago?
They were a little bit reticent. But they couldn't really argue with my logic because they're so, people get so consumed by political correctness, Nigel. But I'll tell you one thing, will make you laugh, just quickly off point. Do you know what one of them said?
Go on.
I do like that Jacob Rees-Mogg. Anyway, getting back on Trump. I mean, his genius. But his genius, there is not a single guy walking in and around in the United States of America right now who could do that job better than Trump. Now, people want to cling on to their prejudices and just keep tearing them down. Like you said with the media this week. I mean, this is what they said when they reported this incredible scoop. Do you know what they were saying? This is very risky. Risky talks with North Korea.
Yeah.
Do you know, and by the way, Nigel, I've got a few sources, that I get. I'll tell you why Kim Jong-un's comes to that table.
Well, I'll be very interested.
Trump was going to take him out. Trump was going to do a strike. I tell you, Trump is very clever. He speaks the rhetoric, then he acts a little like he might not do anything. But behind the scenes, his generals...
My button, Ben. My button's bigger than your one, is what he said, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, if you think that was going to linger on long, if this guy, Kim Jong-un, doesn't talk the right things at the table, there will be a strike on North Korea. Don't you worry about that.
All right, Ben, you may be right, you may not, but you're very certain of your views. Thank you for your call. I think, yes, of course, my button's bigger than yours was important. I get the feeling that those sanctions are basically making life intolerable in North Korea, and it doesn't matter how much power you have as a dictator, you always, always, always fear your own people. I think those sanctions have made a really big difference. Ben says to me by text, too many of our country have forgotten what the word patriot means. They still don't get Trump. Trump is not an intellectual conservative, but his policies so far have been helpful to conservatism. Do not pay attention to his tweets or the way he speaks or what the liberal media say about him. Focus on his policies and you'll like him. I think that is part of the problem, is that people find him very brash. They find him over the top. I think actually many middle-class Americans find the drama of the whole thing on a daily basis somewhat draining. And on Twitter, talking of Twitter, about North Korea, he said, in the first hours after hearing that North Korea's leader wanted to meet with me and talk denuclearization and that missile launches will end, the press was startled and amazed. They couldn't believe it. But by the following morning, the news became fake. They said, so what? Who cares? North Korea, Trump says, has not conducted a missile test since November the 28th, 2017, and has promised not to do so through our meetings. I believe they will honour the commitment. So it's interesting, isn't it, that he's sort of publicly putting faith in somebody that I don't think any of us would naturally, particularly, want to trust. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on RBC. It's now 10:45. Some breaking news. 500 pubgoers in Salisbury, Wiltshire, have been told to very carefully wash all their clothes and anything they had with them if they were out in Salisbury last week, suggesting that there are concerns about the spread of this nerve agent that was used. So it's, it really has become our problem, and we're going to talk about that from 11 o'clock, and we'll keep you up to date with any more breaking news. So, should we start to treat Trump as a friend and an ally, and wish him well in these meetings with Kim Jong-un? I certainly think we should. Janice says on Facebook, he's the UK's friend. He has shown that he doesn't use conventional methods to govern. Well, you can say that again, Janice. But he's getting things done and putting his country first. Our politicians should take a few lessons from him. And I might talk a bit about that, Janice, in the next hour as well. Richard says, I challenge any haters of Trump to ask themselves and be honest. Is there any one thing you could admit Trump has done well? No, Richard, they can't. They simply can't bring themselves to. They loathe and despise him so much. Peter is calling from Birmingham. Good morning, Peter.
Yeah, good morning, Nigel. I think this Trump hysteria that the left try and whip up is absolutely disgraceful. That country and that man is potentially one of our biggest partners, one of our biggest friends. It could do wonders for us if we allied ourselves to him. But unfortunately, we have Appeaser May sucking up to the EU and this, that, and the other. And I think it's wrong. If I'll give you an example, we just had this guy from Saudi Arabia come here.
Yep.
No major protests in London or anywhere else. If Cyril Ramaphosa from South Africa came here, the same thing. There would be no major protests, despite the fact that they just passed an act of parliament in South Africa to seize white land and this, that, and the other. But Trump comes here, they all get upset.
Yeah, well, no, I'm in the Mayor of London and Jeremy Corbyn, and they all want large-scale protests, and they don't even. In fact, John Bercow basically said, the Speaker of the House of Commons, basically said he wanted him banned from coming inside the palace. I mean, I don't know who John Bercow thinks he is, but it is pretty extraordinary stuff, isn't it?
Well, John Bercow's an idiot. Pure and simple.
Well, in the interest of balance, I have to say, Peter, that not everyone thinks that.
No, but the thing is, I mean, the man is the Speaker of the Houses of Parliament. That's supposed to be an impartial
It is.
But he's not being partial. He's in some of his statements that he's made, especially in regard to Trump and others. He's proved himself not to be impartial. And we can't have a speaker of the House of Parliament make statements of a political nature like that.
And yet, Peter, and it goes back to what you said in your first sentence, that the anti-Trump hysteria has meant that the 800-year tradition of the Speaker of the House of Commons being neutral on such things is out of the window, because it's Trump, and it's okay, and we can all hate him. And if we say we hate him in public, it makes us better people, Peter, doesn't it?
It does, but the problem is that they don't like it because Trump is actually being successful. The American economy is moving forwards. The American people, he's bringing jobs back to the United States. He's doing what he said he would do. He said, I will put America first, and that is what he's doing. It's a pity that Theresa May, or Appeaser May as I call her, doesn't put Britain
Theresa
first.
the Appeaser. I think I might have called her unkindly once or twice in the past. Peter,
I call her the Appeaser.
No, I get the point you're making. I really do. Moving on to John in Glasgow. Good morning, John.
Nigel, given that North Korea is an international pariah state, since Friday, where does that leave a large section of the political class in this country, and also a section of the community in this country, who must now look so misguided that there's more likelihood right now of Donald Trump making a state visit to Pyongyang
Yes.
to London?
I hadn't thought about that, John.
How far behind North Korea are we on the international pariah list now?
I like the way you've put that. I mean, the truth of it, John, of course, is that he has been travelling all over the world, hasn't he? I mean, just think in Europe alone. You know, he's been in Warsaw, he's been in Brussels, he's been in Paris, he's been... I forget in Germany where he went. It may have been Berlin. He's been in Rome, in Italy, and I've probably missed a few countries out. So he's been all over Europe, and he's been to Riyadh, and he's been to Beijing, and he's and yeah, as you say, he may even go to North Korea, and he isn't coming here. I think we're beginning to look a bit stupid, John, aren't we?
Well, indeed. I mean, we had this when up here in Scotland when the Scottish government basically denounced Trump the minute he even was talking about running for the president. And instead of when seeing the writing on the wall when he got the nomination, giving up on it, they continued to dig the hole. And it's the same here since he became president. A certain political class in this country has led their followers down a total blind alley instead of what is in the best interest of this country, regardless of what anybody thinks of Trump. And they're still digging the hole, Nigel.
Yeah, that's the impression I get this morning, John. But I also do think, I genuinely think, there are a lot of people more in the middle on this who are, as I say, beginning to think, you know what, Trump is carrying out the manifesto upon which he was elected, and actually, he's not as bad as we thought he was going to be.
Absolutely. I mean, there seems to be this inability to separate out this personal enmity for the man with what is in the interest of this country. There are things done in the interest of this country with all kinds of pariahs or pariahs.
Of course.
All the time.
Including Saudi Arabia.
Well, there's the Saudi Arabia situation, we've got obviously the Russian situation, and there's all sorts of things that government ministers have to swallow their pride on, but it seems that nobody in the Labour Party or in many other sections in the political class, it's now a matter of pride that they have to stick to the principles on Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, John, I really am genuinely hoping for a change of heart from those very senior leading Labour figures. And I think in the national interest, that is exactly what they should do. On Twitter, I get publicly attacking Sadiq Khan and Theresa May and retweeting racist posts from British far-right group, the leaders of which have since been convicted. No, Trump is too unpredictable to be a friend or ally to anybody in the UK, not even to you, says Malcolm. Well, look, you know, he and Sadiq Khan have had this war of words, but perhaps it's not very surprising, is it really, when the Mayor of London wants the bloke banned from coming to our city? And as for retweeting this Britain First stuff, well, as I've explained on this show many, many times before, you know, 43 million people follow Trump on Twitter, and he follows 43, one of whom is Ann Coulter, a conservative American commentator. She tweeted out their videos, he retweeted it, and when Piers Morgan interviewed him, as he said, he'd never even heard of who Britain First were. The left, but anyway, I do understand, Malcolm, a lot of people don't like him, and your point about unpredictability is certainly true. See, I think this announcement about the potential meeting with Kim Jong-un It even caught the White House, the West Wing, and many of his own cabinet by total surprise. So he is unpredictable. He is unconventional. He does things differently, but at the moment, he's not doing them badly. That's the point I'm making. I get by text, the left can't stand Trump because he is destroying their message that the only way to solve the world's problems is full socialism. The silent majority support Trump, and this will be seen when he arrives. Well, when is he going to arrive? We just don't quite know the answer to that. Look, I think in summation of this debate, I do understand why people have reservations about this man. I do understand that he is a little bit too out there for many, many people. He's brash. He's a New Yorker. New Yorkers are very, very like that, and there are many in America that find him tough to deal with, that find, as I said earlier, the drama of the whole thing literally exhausting on a daily basis, just watching the news. I'm going to go to Matt in Hounslow. Matt, is he doing the right thing, going to meet Kim?
Well, who knows what he's, actually doing the right thing, but I think going to your comment about, needing to be tough and using strong words like... Yeah. The button and my button's bigger than yours. I think it's just, first off, it's not a new tactic. This is a tactic that's been tried for years, for decades, unsuccessfully. Go back to Vietnam. This is the madman theory that Nixon tried. And what did it do? It made he started bombing Laos, Cambodia, descended into civil war. He tried to get out, as a political victory before the elections. And it was a disaster. So thinking that acting tough, and playing a hard game with the North Korean leader is going to, as a new tactic. Actually, for the last 20 years, we've been trying that. We decided to label North Korea along with Iran and Iraq in the axis of evil.
But at least, Matt, whatever the reasoning, and you're quite right, there've been many attempts before to do all sorts of things with North Korea. But hey, isn't a face-to-face meeting a good thing?
Yeah, but
yes or no?
Do you really trust Trump's? I think it could be either just a spectacle, which it probably will be. I think it's all just going to be a spectacle distraction, so that they can run their own public, crazy politics.
Well, let's hope, Matt, that it's a bit more than that. Let's hope it's more than political cynicism. Let's hope they really mean it. Thank you. Well, moving on. The Sunday papers today suggesting that Russian oligarchs and their associates have given £820,000 to the Tory party since Mrs May became PM. And what with the ongoing investigation into the poisoning of a former Russian spy, is it time that Mrs May now demanded a meeting with Mr Putin? And if you think, yes, she should confront him and find the truth, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Or perhaps you think, no, we'll give him a completely wide berth, in which case text to 84850. Or maybe you think she should hand back the Russian donor money, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and watch us on Facebook, because we're live from London next.